Hi, and welcome back, everyone. Today I wanted to focus on some security updates in Zoom that have taken place here in the first part of April. So I think a number of these are pretty good in terms of really beefing up security options for us in all of our Zoom sessions. So let's dive in and take a look at those now. Okay, let's jump into it and talk about some of the most recent security updates that could be actually good news for many of our meetings and our virtual classes. So at any time, if you want the most up-to-date resources that I'm offering in terms of my teaching and learning context, you can go to ltccteachingandlearning.com and click on the COVID-19 tab and you can get all this information. And I mention that because in addition to the update I'm doing today, keep in mind I have some videos of previous trainings focused on Zoom, a second video focused on Zoom and privacy, including integration in Canvas, an update to that based on some Zoom bombing experiences I had to deal with and some changes I made in my own practices, and then also a Zoom top 10 tips, which you can look at. So those are in addition to what I'm discussing today, and I'll be sure to link those to any of these communications that go out to you so you can find out on your own. So I want to thank Al Frangione for sending out some of these updates on campus as well in his role as a director of security on campus, including some of the virtual security issues, which so many of us are thinking about now because our operations have moved primarily to this virtual format. So I won't go through all these in depth, but if you're interested, you could always go to zoom.us and look at some of the information being profiled there in terms of how Zoom has tracked some of the security breaches and how they've tried to create some new functionality to deal with those breaches. I think some of the things you're seeing here, maybe you're not using, as far as whether or not you're doing Facebook integration or connecting your Zoom to YouTube as well. I think most of us are probably using it primarily Zoom on its own for video conferencing, but there are options out there, of course, and the more of those options that you take advantage of potentially could increase the security issues that are associated with those options or functions. So things like file transfers, again, Facebook, some of this you might not be actually working with. And then on the second page here, you can see some things that allowed people to rename themselves and joining before host and so forth. Some of that has either been disabled or it's been changed in terms of the defaults that you find under your settings. And to keep that in mind, I'll just jump to Zoom here. So at any time, if you're clicking on your account, you can control a lot of the security functionality both through the scheduling new meeting tab, which allows you to do things like disable or enable the waiting room, which I've done in 100% of my meetings since the Zoom bombing experience. And then also under settings, a lot of the defaults, anytime you see something that is grayed, it typically means it's off. And if you make that active, it turns blue. So you just want to look at your settings and see if you definitely want things to be how they are. A lot of these settings, again, will be then carried forward into your new meetings. So just be sure to go through this carefully because the settings in Zoom are super expansive. And as an example, these are these live streaming meetings that can also be set up through Facebook, Workplace by Facebook, and YouTube. So if that doesn't apply to you, in some cases, these functions will not be relevant to how you're using Zoom and its functions. Now, I want to mention the main purpose of this video is to talk about updates that have happened. So if you're working on a Mac, you were likely working, as I was last night, on 4.6.9. So you just want to make sure that anytime you are using Zoom, and a lot of times I've noticed in my case, the launching of Zoom always defaults to the Mac client, even though I'm often using the web client for doing my settings and so forth. Some limitations on functions within the desktop client, so you just want to look at those. But I had to actually go in and manually do this update. So this will vary from user to user and computer to computer and operating system to operating system. So just be sure to go in and make sure that you have the most current update, because this security setting that I'm talking about today is only available if you've updated to 4.6.10 in terms of the Mac and the Windows client. So be sure of that. So I open the app up, and then what happens is I see this pop up. It says a new version available, please update. I click on update, and then it makes all these changes. The key one is adding this security button in the host meeting toolbar. And I think that's one of the most important updates that's happened in 4.6.10. And I thought, just to give this a look, why don't we just start a meeting here, and then we can get a sense of what that security bar looks like. Obviously, I don't have other participants to work with, but this will give you a sense of what it looks like. So this is the new icon that pops up in Zoom now. So if I click on security, you can see a lot of options here. I can immediately lock the meeting. No one else then can join the meeting at that point. I can always go back to that and unlock it. So it doesn't lock out any of my features that I can do. If the waiting room is not enabled, I can immediately click that, and then that allows me to get that option opening up. And what's cool about the waiting room, we can't see it today, but when you click to admit people, if there are 3 people or 4 people or 10 people waiting, you don't have to individually click on each of those. You could actually click admit all to the meeting. So that's kind of nice. It allows you to do something very quickly there in terms of admitting participants. You can also decide on the fly if you want people to have access to chat, to be able to rename themselves, and to be able to share their screen or not. So all you have to do is click on that security bar, and that really adds a lot of functionality and control for you as the host during the meeting. So I definitely recommend downloading the latest Zoom update so that you have that new security tab or icon that allows you to have much more control and thus prevent things like Zoom bombing from happening during a meeting. And jumping back to security, I do recommend that you go back to my second video on privacy and virtual communication. I talk about a lot of issues that we discussed today, including meeting passwords, the waiting room, and how those actually work in a real setting. So you can look at that last video I did, and it will really get you up to speed as well on some of these issues that we continue to deal with as we're thinking about security for our meetings. And then the last thing I just wanted to say is, as security issues continue to be a concern for us, we want to do some very simple things to make our meetings safe for ourselves as hosts and also for our participants. And that is to be sure to stay on top of the latest Zoom updates. So at any time you could go to zoom.us and you could click on support for more information. You could also click on resources that has a lot of information about, for example, privacy and security, any of those updates, the vulnerabilities and what they're doing about those. And you can also click on any of the other resources or support tabs available to you on Zoom, giving you information about all sorts of functions within Zoom, as well as, of course, the important issue of security. So stay on top of that by going to the Zoom website. Also, do update your software from time to time. If you see the update popping up, be sure to do that immediately. It's just like your operating system on your Mac or Windows desktop. You want to stay on top of those because as new vulnerabilities appear, security experts within the various companies are then going in and creating updates for us to make our experiences safer as end users. And then just look out for any security issues as they might arise in Zoom. Adapt to those as you would adapt on a one-on-one basis with your users, with your participants, with your students, just to be sure that their experience is safe for you and that your experience is a good one as a host in Zoom. Okay, so that's it for today here on some new updates for security in your Zoom sessions. Hopefully these will be helpful for you as you're moving forward, working in your meetings or in your online class sessions. So thanks for listening, and I'll be back with more videos like this in the future.